Good morning, everyone. We're going to do Perek Chaf Aleph, but Perek Chaf Aleph, chapter 21, is a relatively quick Perek, even though it's pretty long. And the reason is because it just primarily a list of cities. And the cities are going to be the 48 cities that were given to the Levium. Those 48 cities that were given to the Levium are spread out all around Eretz Yisrael. And I apologize, I ran out of one of the sheets, but one of the sheets that I gave you had the listing, just the numbers. And so if you just look, there is one page just in Hebrew, which just has the numbers on them. And so if you look, basically every tribe contributed four cities from their territories to the Levium. There were two exceptions to it. The combination of Yehuda and Shimon gave 9 cities. Shimon gave 1, Yehuda gave 8. Now, part of it is a direct reflection on the size of the territory of Yehuda. So if you look just on the map, Yehuda is this massive area of the southern part of Israel from Eretz Yisrael, from Yerushalayim, basically southward. And the other exception to that was Naphtali, who only gave 3 cities. But the 48 cities are spread out all over Eretz Yisrael. And one of the sheets that I did hand out to you is a sheet from the Rambam. It's this sheet from the Rambam, and it really provides the background to all of this. And the Rambam writes, and if you look on Yud Bet, so it's on the page that looks like this, and it's Yud Bet. This is the last chapter within the halachot of Shemitah and Yovel, which talks about Eretz Yisrael as well. He writes, "V'lama lo zacha Levi b'nachalat Eretz Yisrael uvevizatayim achiv." Why is it that Levim had a different status? Why didn't they get actual portions in Eretz Yisrael? And also, why weren't they able to share in the spoils of battles in the conquest of Eretz Yisrael? Later battles, if there were battles that took place later, and Levi was part of the military, and Levi always was part of the military, they could share, but not this initial piece. The Rambam writes, because their job was to be serving God and to serve, to provide that kind of service. And they were also the teachers within Klal Yisrael. And in fact, if you remember later in history, this is one of the great battles that happened in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, who had control. One of the great revolutions of Jewish history happened in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, when they changed the alphabet to the alphabet, the Assyrian alphabet, the one we use today, so it was more accessible to people. And until that point, the Kohanim and the Levim were the keepers of tradition and the teachers of the Jewish people. It was an oral tradition, and those things, it was locked away from people. In fact, that's one of the theories on why later in Jewish history we developed this battle between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, between the Tzedukim and the Perushim. The Tzedukim, who were Kohanim, didn't want to give up that power that they had. But that was their role, to be the teachers. Whereas the Perushim, who we are descendants of, which also known as Rabbinic Judaism, they were the people who were more democratic in terms of the ability of learning Torah. And we see this expressed in Mishnayot as well. Yeah.
What do you see the withholding of Israel?
Well, so the Tzedukim, with the battle of the Tzedukim and Perushim in the original piece, they wanted to hold on to, if you remember the Torah Shebechtav piece, they were holding it was theirs. And that's where the urging. Yeah.
They didn't let anybody access it.
So they did in the beginning, they didn't. If we look through the history, that's in the period of leading up to and into the Bayit Rishon, we see that a big piece, and Yavitz deals with that as well. Zev Yavitz in his history talks about also in the Reformation of Ezra and Nehemiah and how you can build that all up, seeing their roles that they had. But to go even further within the Rambam, it says Shenamar Yoru Mishpatecha liYaakov v'Toratcha liYisrael, that you need to teach the Mishpat. Leficha huvdalu midarkei haolam, and therefore Levim were separated from the rest of the world. Lo orchin milchama b'Yisrael k'Yisrael, they don't go to battle in the same fashion. V'lo nochalim, they don't have inheritances. V'lo zochin latzman bekoach gufam, they don't have the material strength. Elahem chel Hashem, but rather the army of God. Shenamar berech Hashem chelo. V'hu baruch V'hu baruch hu zika lahen, and therefore God gave them this thing. Shneimar ani chelkecha v'nachletecha v'lo shevet bilvad. And then the Rambam concludes with a fascinating statement, which seems to echo part of what is still going on today. It wasn't just Levi. But any Jew who has that spirit driving him, anyone who really separates himself, he wants to stand and serve God, and he wants to understand God, and to go straight like God created humanity. And he moves away from the material existence that most people have. Kodesh Kodashim. This person is also sacred. And God is his portion. And he'll receive what he needs in this world, just like Kohanim and Levim received what they needed. And we see it in the words of David HaMelech. This is, by the way, this last paragraph within the Rambam is one of the basis of people who say they want to reject parts of the rest of the world around them, the material world, and they want to be able to dedicate themselves fully like the Levium and the Kohanim were. But the Levium and the Kohanim, by the way, part of the distinction is in Milchamot Mitzvah, everyone went out, everyone was part of the Milchama. But the question of why Levi didn't get what they got, well, one is the curse. We refer many times, Afitzem Israel, that they're going to be scattered within the Jewish people, going back to the conquest of the city of Shechem, and afterwards where Yaakov Avinu cursed them, he cursed Reuven and Levi and Shimon, or Shimon and Levi. And part of it is also because of their task, their role. These cities that they're going to get in this chapter were not their cities. These were the cities where they were able to reside, where they lived, where they conducted themselves. And as we'll see, for example, Kahat, that had the most intimate obligations within the Beit HaMikdash, they were the ones closest around Yerushalayim. And as we move out, the other subsections, the Bnei Kohanim, the Kohanim were the closest, and then we move out and out. So there are actually four groups. As you see on that chart, we have the Bnei Kat, which include the Kohanim and their children, and then we have the rest of Kahat, because Kahat had Moshe and Aaron, so the Aaron descendants are there, and then you have the Gershon and the Merari, and keep on moving outward. So most of this chapter is going to be dealing with this, and also this is really following up what had been talked about in Sefer Bamidbar. So in Perek Chaf Aleph, we start out right at the beginning, very simple things. Vayikshu Roshei Avot HaLevim Elazar Kohen Yehoshua bin Nun. The leaders of the Levium come to Elazar, and they come to Yehoshua bin Nun, and when they come, and they say very simply, okay, I'm sorry, Vel Roshei Matot Livnei Yisrael Vayidabru Alehem b'Shilo be'Eretz Canaan Lemor, and they approach them where the Mishkan was, which was in Shiloh, and they tell them as follows: Hashem tziva biyad Moshe lated lanu arim lashevet umigrasheim levemtenu. God had gone ahead and God told us that we were going to get cities and we were going to get areas around those cities, the migrash that was immediately around those cities, 2,000 amot, as we'll see. And so as a result, time has come for this. Now, ultimately, we see within this parak, as the Abarbanel says, that the amount that every Shevet is going to contribute isn't equal, as I mentioned, and it's based on the very simple thing that goes down, that it's based on echut, says the Abarbanel, and not the kamut. It's based on the quality of the spaces and not necessarily the quantity of spaces, even though most of the tribes gave about 4. So Vayitnu b'nei Yisrael laleviim min achlatam el pi Hashem, and so everyone gave them these places et harim ha'elev et migrashem. They gave them these cities, and they also gave the areas around them. Now, again, when we look at what they requested in pasuk bet arim lashavet, cities in which to reside, umigrashem levemtenu, and their areas around the protected areas for the animals. They didn't actually request cities. And this, the Abarbanel points out, teaches us very simply, they didn't get the city themselves. The Abarbanel proves it, for example, that Atzmot Yosef were buried within Shechem, okay? Even though Shechem is going to be one of the cities of the Levium. Well, if you want to go ahead and bury the remains of Yosef in Yosef's tribe, in the tribe of Yosef, why in God's name would you pick a city that you don't have as one of yours if you gave away the city in Shechem to Levim? So the Rabbi says, because they didn't give away the cities. These were places, though, for Levim to live. These were the places that they were given access to. They were given the lands, not as their nachalan per se, not as their ownership, but a place for them to be. Vayetzeh goral, and then we begin the process of the goral, of the lottery again. And in this case, the way the Malbim explains it, that when it came, okay, to what should be given, okay, when they would call out the name Bnei Aharon, for example, then all of a sudden you would have the names of the tribes light up on the Urim V'Tumim, and you know which tribes would be giving them. And it was all based again on their need to access the Beit HaMikdash. L'mishpachot Akati. The first one up was Kahat. Kahat again had Kohanim, and Kahat also had the Leviim who were in charge of the transport of the parts of the Beit HaMikdash. Vahi livnei Aaron HaKohen min Levim mimateh Yudah mimateh Shimonim mimateh Vinyanim begoral is Arim Shlosh Yisrael. And altogether, they had 13 cities that were to the tribe, to the Bnei Aaron. The 13 cities came from Yehudah and Shimon. Shimon and Yehudah are together, and also came from Binyamin. In other words, the closest areas. Those were the 13 cities. 9 came from Yehudah and Shimon, and 4 were going to come from Binyamin. V'livnei Kahat, and then to the remainder members of Kahat, the actual Levim of Kahat, hanotarim mimishpachot matei Ephraim u'matei Dan u'mechatzim matei Menashe begoral Arim Eser, and they then got from the areas of Ephraim. Just you notice, again, we start here. Here's the core space because the Beit HaMikdash is right here, and then we begin looking at Ephraim. Okay, or as this is identified as West Ephraim, okay, and from Dan, okay, and it's all of these areas that are all around. Here's Dan, right over here, okay, and then you have Mechatzi Mateh Menashe, okay, and this Menashe, Ephraim, and Dan. So this is where the rest of Kahat. So Kahat basically has this whole area from here downward. The most significant portion closest to Yerushalayim is with the tribe that have the Kohanim and have the Leviim who serve the most significant service in the Beit HaMikdash itself. And altogether, then you have 23 cities. There's 13 that went to the Kohanim and another 10 to the rest of the Leviim of their tribe. V'livnei Gershon, and then to the other segment of the Levi tribe, mimishpachot matei Yisachar, umimatei Asher, mimatei Naphtali, umichatzei matei Menashe, v'Bashan begoral Arim Shlosh Yisrael. And they get 13 cities, I'm sorry. And their 13 cities, well, they start out with East Menashe, okay, they have the East Menashe, and they have Yisachar, and remember they're moving up here into this area up here, a little bit further north, and they're moving at the same time eastward here as well. And they have in their cities 13. V'livnei Merari, and then you have the cities of Merari, Lemishpachotam, Matei Ruvain, Matei Gad, Matei Zvulun, Arim Shem. And then the rest of the cities that are handed out are going to be given to Merari. Now, interestingly, in this piece, the Malbim points out, he says, wait a second, something's missing in this. If I look at Pasuk Hey, it starts with a Vav, V'livnei Kahat. I look at Vav, and it starts V'livnei Gershon. I look, though, at Zion, and it just says Livnei Merari. It doesn't say and to Merari. And the reason, explains the Malbim, is because when it came to the tribe, to the sub-tribe of Merari, there was no Goral. They didn't have a lottery. They didn't have the lottery. And the reason they didn't have the lottery is they got what was left over. We gave out everything to everybody else, and you know what you get. You get the leftovers. Not that the leftovers are necessarily bad. The leftovers were the furthest away because that was they didn't have the same necessity of being there in the same place. There will be one more problem that we're going to encounter with Pasuk Zion, and that is that there are 12 cities that it says that they got. The problem with the fact that it says they got 12 cities is that we're only going to find 8 cities enumerated within this parak. And it's not going to have the 4 cities that were given by Reuven to that tribe. And Reuven is over here. those four cities that are going to come from there are not listed in this parak. So interestingly, and this is fascinating actually, there are versions of the text of our parak which insert a pasuk to describe Ruvain giving that section. That piece that they describe them giving the section actually is coming from Divrei Hayamim. Divrei Hayamim, we have the listing of the cities going to get, and the Abarbanel and others point out, that extra pasuk that's kind of thrown into this parak really doesn't belong here, even though it's found in some manuscripts. It had been inserted to make it a into Yehoshua. So, and there are some printed Chumash Nachim which have those psukim built into them as well. No, from long time ago. Now, so then we have and they were given. Okay, and they were given, and this is just fulfilling the piece. And now we begin to have the list of the cities. So in Tet, and this really is a quick piece to do. These are the cities that are going to be given from Shimon and from Yehuda, which are going to be identified by name. So the offspring of Aaron, the Kohanim, they were the first ones who were taken care of by the lottery. Kiryat Arba, and they got Kiryat Arba. Avi Ha'anok hi Chevron Bahar Yehuda, which was Avi Ha'anok. The Radak says Avi Ha'anok was the greatest, the Gadol of the Anakim, of the giants who were there. Vet Migrashas Vivota, and also the areas around it. Generally, the Migrash was considered 2,000 amot on either side. So they had the city proper, and they had 2,000 amot, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 feet all around the city, which was considered part of the city. But the city itself, okay, where we have in the midst of the city, well, Kalev already got Hebron. And so Yehuda had piece of it. And this again builds up this idea of these cities not totally belonging to the Levim, but being used by Levim. He was there. And they gave Hebron, which was also an Ir Miklat. If you look on this map, you'll see the red squares. There are 6 red squares, 3 on each side. Last week we learned about the Ir Miklat. So you see that Hebron is an Ir Miklat. Kiryat Arba, which is right near it, okay, is considered one of the Arei Levim, and Hebron, being an Ir Miklat, a city of refuge, also served. And last week or 2 weeks ago, we dealt with the difference. What's the difference between an Ir Miklat or not, or just one of the Arei Leviim? One was the obligation to provide, and the other was the obligation where once you walked in, even if you didn't realize you were walking into an Ir Miklat, it was kolet. You were safe. If you walked into one of the cities of Leviim by accident, a person who had killed someone unintentionally, and it was by accident, he didn't realize I made it within city limits, he wasn't safe yet. He had to have knowledge of that safety as well. And so it continues. Ve'et yatir, ve'et migrasha, ve'eshtamoa, ve'et migrasha. And if you look on the map, you'll see where yatir is spelled with a J here. Okay. Eshtamoa is right above it. So you have yatir and you have eshtamoa right above it in the cities. And again, some of these cities we know for sure. And some of these cities, as you'll see, have just circles around them without the green. And that's because we're not sure where they are. Oh, 100%. The Arabs did us a great favor by maintaining the original names. Okay, so if you look at many of the names they call places, that we see that these are based on the biblical names, and that helps us identify where they are. Vet Cholon vet Migrasha, vet Vir vet Migrasha, vet Ayin vet Migrasha, vet Yuta vet Migrasha, vet Beit Shemesh vet Migrasha, Arim Tesha Me'et Shnei Shvatim Ha'el. When we see that ultimately within Shimon, within the green, there are going to be 9 cities in addition to the Ir Miklat, which were given to the sons of the Kohanim. Then umimatem, and we just continue umimatem. And again, this is primarily a listing, so I'm not stopping too much. Matem Binyamin et Givon vet Migrashen. If you look in Binyamin, you'll see there's Givon, Gibeon, it says vet Geva, which is Geba, vet Migrasha. Et Anatot, we remember what Anatot is. That's where Yirmiyahu comes from. So Anatot is also the city. Anatot, if you look, is right above Jerusalem. Vet Migrasha, Vet Almon, which is right above that. Vet Migrasha Arim Arba. There were four cities that came from Binyamin. Kol Arevnei Aaron HaKohanim Shlosh Esrei Arim Migrashem. Four from Yehuda, nine from Yehuda and Shimon. Ulemishpachot b'nei Kahat. Now we're moving further north. Haleviim anotarim ibnei Kahat. There were the Leviim, not the Kohanim of Kahat, but the Leviim from Kahat. Vayhi arei goralami mate Ephraim. And their areas they were taking first from Ephraim. Vayitnu lahem et ir miklat harotzeach et Shechem vet Migrasha. So first of all, there's the ir miklat of Shechem, okay, and its area, Bahar Ephraim, which is in the Harei Ephraim. Vet Gezer, Vet Migrashan. They also have the city known as Gezer. And Kivtzayim, Vet Migrashan. They get Kivtzayim. And again, just going quickly, Vet Beit Choron, Vet Migrasha, Arim Arba. So we see that within this purple area, there are going to be four cities. And those four cities, like most tribes were giving four cities, we're going at this point to the Kahatim, the rest of the Kahatim who were just Levim. Vet Kivtzayim, Vet Migrasha, Vet Beit Choron, Vet Migrasha, Arim Arba. Umimateh Dan. And now I look at Dan. And Dan, if you remember, the easiest way to remember Dan is now in modern Israel, Gush Dan. Everyone knows Gush Dan. That's the Tel Aviv region. That's where Dan originally was, even though Dan ultimately, by the time of the Shoftim, is also moving further north to be able to get the additional lands, which is why you have up there Tel Dan in the further north, because Dan had also moved. Et El Tekeh ve'et Migrasha, et Gibton ve'et Migrasha, et Ayalon ve'et Migrasha. Ayalon, we have the Ayalon Highway today, the same name. Ve'et Gat Rimon ve'et Migrasha Rim Arba. So from within Dan, within the darker orange, there are four areas. Umimachatzit Mateh Menashe, and from half of Menashe, Et Tanach vet Migrasha vet Gat Rimon vet Migrasha Rim Shteim. They got two cities from within what on the map is identified as West Menashe. Now, interestingly, if I follow the approach of the Abarbanel, the Abarbanel's approach is that it's based on quality of land, which means if you look at the size of West Menashe's territory, is a pretty large territory, and yet that territory had a lot of mountains and did not have a lot of free area that they were able to contribute to cities for, versus Dan, which is a smaller area, or Binyamin, that's a smaller area, even a smaller area, was able to give the same number of cities out of the smaller space. ולבני גרשום משפחות הלוויים מחצי מטה מנשה את העיר מקלט הרוצח את גולן בבשן ואת מגרשה. Then Gershom got, okay, first they got from Menashe. Now the other part of Menashe is all the way on the eastern boundary, and you see it's further north. They get Golan Babashan, and they get Ba'ashtaram ve'et Migrashan. They also get Ashtara or Ashtarot, in this case Arim Shtaim. They get two there. They got two from West Menashe and two from East Menashe. Menashe gave four cities like the other tribes. Umimatei Yisachar. And ultimately, when you get to the Mateh of Yisachar, the tribe of Yisachar, well, at Kishyon vet Migrasha, at Dovrat vet Migrasha. So there you're looking at where Yisachar is. It's a blue-green up there, and you see the cities there. At Yarmut vet Migrasha, at Ein Ganim, ve'et Migrasha Arim Arba. So there are four cities within Yisachar. And then ve'et Umimateh Asher. We go up to Asher. Asher is the green along the coast, the furthest north along the coast. And there you have Mishal. And if you look, Mishal, you see right there, right below the word Asher, vet Migrasha, vet Avdon. And Avdon, if you look right above, a little to the right of the name of Asher, it says Abdan, I guess. Vet Migrasha, et Chelkat, vet Migrasha, Chelkat, Vet Rachovet Migrasha. Rachov is here. Chelkat is also not
under Zebulun.
right under Zavulun. Where is it? I see Chelkat. And if you notice, those cities, we're really not sure where they are, which is why they have the white dot as opposed to a green dot. Arim Arba. Umimatei Naphtali. Now I'm going up to Naphtali already. And Naphtali at the Ir Miklat Harotzeach et Kedesh Begalil. So first of all, they have Kedesh. That's the red square there. Vet migrasha, vet chamot dor et migrasha, and then they have chamot dor, which we should be able to find. Hopefully, you can help me find it. Chamot is right on the side of the Galil, of the Sea of Galilee, of the Kinneret. If you look right on the side there, it's Chamat. Vet kartan, and then kartan is above it, but we're not really sure what it is. Vet migrasha arim shalosh. Naphtali, if you recall, was the one tribe that gave only 3 cities. Kol arei hagershoni mishpachotam 13 ir umigrashem, and they got 13 cities altogether. Ulemishpachot b'nei Merari haleviim anoterim me'et b'nei Zvulun, and now we get all the way over to Merari, last group of the Levium. At first, they're getting from Zvulun. Zvulun, if you see, is that red, not red. It's I don't know. It's a purple reddish color. They get Yoknam. Okay, hopefully we can find Yoknam there. Do we see Yoknam in Zvulun? I see. Where's Yoknam? Yoknam is all the way. It's actually looks like it's in West Menashe. It's like it's a green dot at the bottom southwest section of Zvulun. Vet Migrasha vet Karta, and also Karta, which is where is Karta vet Migrashaha?
Kartan is right by
Karta.
Chaman.
I think we already right. Et Dimna, okay, so Ve'et Migrashet Nahalal, which is over, if you see here in this map, they put it in Asher. Vet Migrasharim Arba. So they get 4 cities. Umimate Gad. And then we have Gad. Gad is on the eastern side, the Transjordan, at Irmiklat Rotzeach. So first of all, they have the city of the Rotzeach at Ramot Gilad. That's a square, the red square. Vet Migrasha, Vet Machanaim, Vet Migrasha. Machanaim is below it. Okay, further south, at Cheshbon, and they have the city of Cheshbon, which is right at the southern border of Gad, Vet Migrasha, Vet Ya'azer, which we're really not sure that's a white dot Jazer, it says, Vet Migrasha, Kol Harim Arba. God gave 4 cities. Kol Harim Livnei Merali Mishpotam Anoterim Mishpot Halavim, and all of those cities all together, Vayigor Alam Arim Shtem Esrei, and they were 12. So there's 48 cities, and those 40 cities all together include the 6 Arei Miklat and the 42 regular cities as well, and their area around them. And like these, all these cities had the same ground rules. They had the city and the area around them. Those were the places of the Levium. And following up on what the Rambam says, the reason why the Levium got it is because the Levium weren't involved in the monetary matters. They were taken care of because that was their role. It isn't unusual in Jewish history that the people who are charged with teaching Jews are not among the wealthy class. And it's not because necessarily they need to be among the wealthy class. These are the people who dedicated their lives for others. Levi was charged with that. And so they were given space, and then they were also given income based on maaser, based on the tithes and other things. They were given the income as well to be able to take care of themselves. Vayiten Hashem liyisrael et kol haaretz asher nishba latet lahem lavotam. And God gave to the Jewish people all the land that he had promised them, vayirashua vayeshvuva, and they inherited it, and they reside in it. Says the Abarbanel, but they didn't conquer it. In other words, what this pasuk says is God gave it to us. God gave us the ability to clear out all of the nations of the world. We were ready to do so, but the Jews didn't follow through on their task. They didn't finish up the job. But says the Abarbanel, don't blame God for that. That's the fault of the Jewish people. That we had it, he gave it to us, we didn't do what we needed to do. Vayanach Hashem lahem misaviv, and God actually gave them tents. from all around, from their neighbors, all around the areas. He gave them the peace, and he gave them their peace during the land. Kechol asher nishba levotam, like he promised. So even though at this point, 14 years after they entered into the land of Israel, they hadn't conquered all of the cities of the land of Israel, but the battles were over. And no one was standing up to challenge them. All the enemy they gave into their hands, but they didn't finish up their task. They should have finished and conquering the nations. Kick them out, take care of whatever needed to be taken care of. If you remember, there were cities that I was what basically is the state right now, and this is where we find the problem in the times of the Shoftim, which we're almost at. The problem right now is there's peace. No one's making any trouble, but there is going to become an insidious assimilation and insidious impact by having the non-Jews, the pagans, living in Eretz Yisrael.
There's a conception.
Concepcia. You have, right. What you have there is, if you imagine for a moment, you don't. It's a piece that there's no fighting, but sometimes everyone getting along is also not the good thing. Okay, sometimes everyone getting along, it's like lahavdil. People, one of the things that always comes up whenever you're at any kind of event that is cross-denominational. Okay, in Hebrew, I prefer the term zramim, the many streams of Jewish definition. Okay, the people start talking about this wonderful word pluralism. Okay, I always tell people I don't believe in pluralism. I believe in respect. Pluralism means I'm right and you're right, but nobody believes that. Okay, when they start up with the pluralism, I said, why don't you do me a favor? Go to a conservative rabbi and ask him if he accepts a reform conversion. He doesn't accept it. So he's not pluralistic. He wants to be respectful. I want to be respectful. But when you have that idea that everyone's getting along, all of a sudden, everyone getting along, there are value judgments that are made, and there's impact that people have on others. Yeah.
It would have been, the ideal situation that of course Berker wanted us to execute here was that we expel nations who do not accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Or make them, there's a machloket, or make them into Gerei Toshav, or make them into an alien citizen, I guess, but where they have an obligation to observe the 7 Noachite laws, which means they're not worshiping idols anymore. We're not asking them to become Jewish. We're just asking them to be good non-Jews. Jews have never had a problem with non-Jews. Okay, the 7 Noachite laws are not too complicated. Okay, it's the big 3. It's Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayot, and Shvichut Damim. Don't murder, don't be immoral, and don't worship idols. And then you have don't eat Aver Min HaChai, and you can't curse out God, and you can't steal, and you can't. What's Dalid? And I'm skipping one. Huh? Dinim, right? In courts, dinim. Okay, and establish a judicial system. It's not a lot, and so had they accepted to be either Bnei Noach or had they accepted to leave, that's fine. Otherwise, we go to battle with them.
So it's a theological kind of conquest more than a physical one.
Well, it's both, because we do have to go to war with them. We send them. If they refused, and it's definitely that favorite phrase, which they hate in Israel, kfiyat datit, there is a certain amount of forced religion. The religion is not Judaism that we're forcing them. The religion is the Noachite religion. But that's what we wanted. And in fact, if you look in Pasuk Mem Gimel, the way the parak bends, Lo nafal davar mikol hadavar hatov asher diber Hashem al Beit Yisrael hakol ba. The Navi finishes off and says, everything God said would happen, it all happened. In other words, this was the success that we missed out on. God did everything on his side. We didn't do everything on our side. And that's what the Abarbanel points out in this parak. While the parak is just a study of a map on one hand, on the other hand, this is like the culmination. Every tribe has their space. We've now set up a system where the religious functionaries are able to do what needs to be done to continue the religion, the faith, the knowledge, it's perfect almost. If only we had done that last piece. And then we're going to be getting up to the closing prakim next week. Yeah.
Do we have any idea until when on the other side of the Jordan River Jews lived? Until what period?
Yeah, we know that they were exiled. The earliest of the exiles was 20. Yafi, you'll help me on this one. Yeah, no, it was like 20 some years before. I think it was
100 years before the final.
before the final Churban, but I think it was like it was the earliest. Right. Yeah, right, yeah. So it was they had them, and then the next piece had the dispersion of the next piece.
And by saying
But no, Bayit Sheni, no, they were gone by the end of Bayit Rishon, before the end of Bayit Rishon. And we even see, by the way, if you remember, where they tried to build the Mizbeach on the other side because they knew they needed something to hold on to, and they weren't able to hold on to it. And so those will leave, and exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid of occurs, even though he divides up Menashe into two halves to try to keep those connections as well. Okay, we're going to stop here. Next week, we're going to pick up with the next parak, and we're almost done with Sefer Yehoshua. Everyone should have a wonderful day, and if anyone's going to the Matan program, you'll make it on time.
I just said.